Welcome to the Hockey Writers Prospect Corner, a show with our top prospects writing crew, bringing you the latest news, analysis, scouting reports, mocks, rankings, and much more. From the World Juniors to the NHL draft floor, from the farm to the NHL, our team covers everything that happens in the world of prospects. So sit back, grab a notebook, and get ready for Prospect Corner.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Prospect Corner presented by the Hockey Writers. Today, we're going to be taking a look at some prospects around the hockey world who have been surprisingly great this year, as well as a couple who have been a little disappointing so far. I'm your host, Logan Horn, and today I am joined by my co-hosts and fellow prospect analysts, Matthew Zator and Peter Baracchini, once again. How are things there, Matt? It looks like Christmas is in full swing on your end.
Yeah, I got my Christmas tree up yesterday, and I'm always of the thing of putting Christmas December 1st. Yes, it was the 2nd, but whatever. But it has to be December. I can't put it up at the end of November. Some people already get their Christmas stuff. It's like last week in November, and I'm like, no, I can't do it. Once December hits, I just make my Christmas spirit. I just flip a switch. But yeah, it's going good.
Nice. I mean, I'll argue for you. Like it's a different experience out on the West Coast than in most of Canada because there's no winter weather to get you into the Christmas spirit. There's no snow at any point to get you into the Christmas spirit. So whatever works for you to get there. If it takes, waiting right until the 1st or later or earlier, you do whatever works for you. Okay, I'm glad you're doing well. I'm glad it's in frame too, so we can all enjoy it as well. Perfect. Yeah. Peter, how are you doing? How is December kicking off for you out there?
Doing good. I mean, everything was basically up in like November for me, for my family, because we're November, right after Halloween. Yeah, we already get set up. We do our decorations outside before it gets cold, before we do anything. But yeah, I'm really excited. And you know what? It's December, so you know that Juniors is just around the corner. So Christmas part 2. So yeah. We really can't wait for that tournament to kick off.
Yeah, the real important winter holiday,
Exactly.
Yeah, December 26th. Yeah, I mean, we're not going to get too much into World Juniors today just because there's nothing to talk about yet because we don't know any of the players going officially. I believe, if I have the dates correct, last year, most countries had announced their selection camp rosters around the 5th. We're recording this on the 3rd. So likely in the next few days, we'll hear about selection camps. And then it took about a week for most countries to announce their rosters, although some kind of tinker with a few players through some exhibition games. But as soon as that stuff starts trickling in, we're going to start going into those countries and analyzing possible lines and star players and surprising players, anything that you could possibly think to talk about. We're going to get cracking on that as soon as we possibly can. So stay tuned for more World Junior stuff, the real important winter holiday. All right. I'll mention before we kick off here that the Hockey Writers have recently expanded our content with a Substack dedicated to every NHL team, as well as one dedicated to NHL draft and prospects content. You can sign up to get all of the best prospect content on our site delivered right to your inbox multiple times throughout the week. And there's also a premium tier with exclusive articles, mailbags, prospect interviews, and more. You can find a sign-up link for that in the video description below. Check it out. All right. So, as I said at the top of the show, we're going to talk about a bunch of prospects who have been surprisingly great to start the year. And then as well as a couple that are disappointing. I don't want to be a downer, so there's just a small few of the disappointing ones. But also because there's so many great stories to talk about, and that's just more fun. So I'm going to get us kicked off here actually with Zach Benson. So I don't know if this counts because we loved Zach Benson last year. So I don't know if it's a surprise that he's this great, but I think it's a surprise that he's this good in the NHL this soon. We knew he was great. We knew he scored a ton in the dub last year, the WHL, but if you had asked me just in September, is he going to stick it out in the NHL this year? I would have been like, he's got the play style to do it, but he's not going to have any significant offense. He's going to be overpowered a bit by the NHL competition. That hasn't really been the case. I thought he might need another year in junior. Who knows? He could still get half a year in junior if he does end up going to the World Juniors, which seems kind of unlikely at this point, which is wild because the Sabres are in a little bit of a rough spot right now, and so any help they can get is welcome. He's been phenomenal. He's really just outperformed my expectations for him this early on. And we'll talk about him a little more later in the show. And I'll get your guys' thoughts on some stuff about the fact that he slipped to 13th in the draft, even though I think we all roughly agreed that maybe like 5th or 6th overall, roughly in that area, was where we thought he probably deserved to go. Man, he's been excellent. Just so much fun to watch. The hardest working guy out there. He's kind of like I mean this in the nicest way possible, Matt, I guess. He's like a good Connor Garland. Like Connor Garland is everywhere. And when you watch him, you think he should be better than he is, but it just doesn't always click. He has games where it all clicks together and the offense is really popping and the production's there. But Zach Benson already looks similar. And I think he's still just 18. It's absurd. He's great. Big surprise that he's this great in the NHL already. So he's going to have a great long career there with that absurdly talented forward group that Buffalo's building. All right, Peter, I'm going to come to you next. Actually didn't check today after last night's games, but when I was preparing this, these were the leaders in the AHL scoring race, teammates Logan Stankoven and Mavrik Bourque. What are your thoughts on those guys and how great they've been to start here?
Yeah, they're still leading the AHL 1-2 in scoring. It's absolutely phenomenal. And Bourque was named, the top player of the month, and Stankoven was named the AHL Rookie of the Month as well. So kudos to them too. I mean, it's just, we've talked extensively about Logan Stankoven before, but we've even like highlighted Mavrik Bourque a little bit because there were some positive signs when he did go pro for a bit, especially when he was going back and forth between pro and then he went back to junior. It seems like whatever worked is working wonders for him right now because he's just energetic and he's on a whole nother level right now. Believe the year was 2021 where he played in 5 games, just under a point per game in the AHL, and then he goes back to the Shawinigan Cataracts in the QMJHL, and then he plays the next season in Shawinigan. So I think but that was still around like, the COVID times where players were still getting their feet wet, moving up, moving down. 47 points last year, and he's on pace for 99 this year. We all love the projected on pace stats for the AHL.
Oh, man.
Again, we don't know if that's sustainable or not, but what he's doing is phenomenal. And Logan Stankoven, we've just talked about him extensively on here, like I said, where the dynamicism, the impact, the fact that, he's still like in that 5'10" range, and how he was overlooked and dropped to the second round when we pretty much had him as a first rounder, or at least a late first for that matter. And he's just continuing to make the Stars look like geniuses at this point because, you know what? It would surprise me that maybe if one or both of them maybe so much more Bourque gets a call up because he has more of that AHL experience in pro level than Stankoven. But it's not crazy to suggest that Stankoven could be a rookie by next year and maybe get a full-time spot or knock somebody down where you have both of your top 2 rookies on an already deep and talented Dallas Stars team for 24-25. So again, remains to be seen, but they're definitely headed in that right direction.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I mean, we knew Bourque was good and we knew he was successful in the AHL. Like you said, last year was a solid year for him. Really positive. But to basically be on pace to double those totals is absurd. And for Stankoven to go from destroying the WHL, which we're like, maybe it'll be a little different once he goes pro. Maybe he won't be able to do it quite as much. Yeah. No.
No,
that's not the case. He's fine. He's doing just fine. I agree with you. It feels like they could kind of be some real competition for Max Celebrini for the Calder next year. If they can even make the team, because like you said, there's a ton of talent offensively, or at least on the forward core for the Stars, but they're going to have to make space eventually because these guys are legit. A great start for them. All right, Matt, you're up next with a certain goaltender. I'll let you introduce him.
He's making me look a little bit, he wasn't my top goaltender in my rankings. I don't know he may be now, but Jesper Wallstedt, he's been phenomenal in the AHL. He was really good last season, but he's been better this season, and he just made a career high 43 saves last night, I believe, as we're recording this. 3-2 win over Colorado's AHL affiliate, the Eagles, and man, and that's just a tip of what he's been doing this season. He's got a 2.03 goals against average, 937 save percentage, and 2 shutouts. And the Minnesota Wild, I mean, their goaltending hasn't been that good this season. Gustafsson was what everyone was thinking. Oh yeah, he looks like he's the starter. He's kind of, the questions are a little bit that he may not be solidified as that starter. Now that, especially with Wallstedt, how he's performing the AHL. So he could actually be in the conversation next season as I don't know if the starter, but definitely up in the NHL, especially if he keeps this going. We all know the development path of goaltenders is not linear. We don't know. Sometimes it takes a while for them to get where they want to be, but Wallstedt, we all in the draft here, everyone was saying, well, he should have been drafted first. And he's really solidified the fact that he should have been the first goaltender off the board.
Yeah.
Kosa hasn't been that good in the AHL this season either. I mean, he's had some flashes, but I believe his goals against average is over 3 now. And, you're looking at Wallstedt, how he's been developing, and from last season where he had a 2.68 GAA and 908 save percentage, which is decent for a first season in the AHL. And now he's up to this. I mean, yes, small sample size, only 12 games, but that goals against average is really good. And that 937 save percentage is amazing. So, yeah, I don't know how much more you can say about Wallstedt. He's going to be an NHL goaltender. It's just a matter of when that'll be in the Wild system, and if they think Gustafsson is the long-term solution, or if they want Wallstedt in here sooner.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been a treat to watch him develop, honestly. And yeah, like you said, he's always going to be compared to Kosa forever and ever and ever. But Kosa's had an okay year, to go from not being good enough for the AHL last year to being serviceable as a tandem starter is good. But Wallstedt is one of the best goaltenders in the entire league at this point, and kind of knocking on the door for a Wild team that could use some saves. Who knows? Maybe he's too young and they want to wait it out, or the year's lost, or some. Who knows what their plan is for him? But probably doesn't hurt to dominate the AHL for another year at the Iowa Wild. Just a great start for him. It's been unreal. Next up, I'll talk about someone who really just wanted to help me out last night. He scored 4 goals last night after I already was prepared to talk about him. And that's Connor Geekie, playing for the Wenatchee Wild, formerly Winnipeg Ice in the WHL. He has been phenomenal this year. So his draft year, he scored right around a point per game, 6'3" centerman. That excites NHL teams. I think he went 11th overall, which was higher than we expected, but understandable with the size and the potential offensively. And then last year, the year after his draft, he scored at a slightly higher rate, but really nothing significant. And we kind of expected to see him dominating the competition, just being physically imposing and doing a ton offensively. But really, Savoy and Benson stole his thunder completely. This year, though, at the start of the year, both Savoy and Benson were with the Buffalo Sabres, their NHL affiliate, their NHL team. And he was holding down the fort for the Wild, and it was like, nice. That's really cool to see. He can be the guy on a team when some other teammates aren't in attendance. But then he kept it up, and it's like, okay, maybe this is legit. And then Savoy came back, and Geekie was still amazing. And he's continued it. And last night he scored 4 goals. So in 25 games to start the year, he has 19 goals and 45 points. He's on pace for 118 points this year. And the only reason he won't get that is because he's going to be at the World Juniors. He's probably going to be a top 6 center for Canada at the World Juniors. I think there's a really good shot he ends up there. depending on how their selection camp goes. Just a really, really encouraging start. I mean, he's at that age now where if you don't score at this rate as a high level prospect, it starts to be a little worrisome. But just the way he's done it he's just been so dominant possession wise, playmaking wise, and really mentally growing into his body that grew a few years ago. It feels like he's a lot more confident and comfortable protecting the puck and knocking people off pucks. So really exciting if you're a Coyotes fan to see that, especially with how cool he has looked so far. You don't need Geekie to ever be a top line center. You need him to be a really solid middle six center. And that's looking much more possible than it did 12 months ago, I'd say. So Connor Geekie is another one of our surprising prospects so far this year. Who's next up here? Peter, you're next up. I gave you an OHLer because I know you love those guys. We've talked about this guy
absolutely,
but you're up next here. Who's your next surprising prospect?
Yeah, I would say maybe go back 1, 2, or 3 episodes ago when Matt's talked about Hunter Brzustewicz, Brzustewicz,
and 4 episodes ago, and 5 episodes ago.
Okay, there we go. Okay, yeah. I mean, Hunter's just been on another level, and he was taken early in the 3rd round, which was a good pick. Obviously, many had him as like a late second, but we're splitting hairs there because it's still within that same range, but. Man, it's making the Vancouver Canucks look really good to have that type of dynamicism and playmaker from the back end. And it's very reminiscent of that of what you're seeing from Quinn Hughes, where he's very manipulative in terms of when he has the puck, changing its directions, faking motions, making swift dekes in the neutral zone, in the offensive zone. He works well in tight spaces. I think that the biggest concern was the lack of shooting, and he needed to take more shots. And we're already seeing that right now because he's already matched his goal total from last season with 6. So you're starting to see that goal scoring mentality a little bit. The playmaking and transitional play and breakouts is absolutely phenomenal. Really was hoping to see if he could try and elevate that aspect or his game a little bit more. We're seeing that right now. So big step for him, big step or big sign for the Vancouver Canucks, who could use a couple more D in the system, not necessarily in the system, but to make the jump right now, especially with the way that they're playing. I mean, their prospects could take as long as they need because they seem to be in a really good spot. But Hunter's been really, really a very pleasant surprise this season, considering how there were some question marks about his game last year, and I think he's putting some of those to rest.
Yeah, absolutely. I think he's done a really great job of building on the season he had last year, and proving some people wrong, proving that he possibly could be a serious prospect for the NHL. Like typically early 3rd round prospects, you're just you're taking an educated shot in the dark. These are guys that you see a few of the tools are there, but there's something missing in most teams' eyes if you're taking someone that late. But he's definitely improved. And I mean, if he didn't have any goals, I think he would still be 5th in OHL scoring. Like he's got 38 assists, which is absurd. At least a few days ago, that was the most assists anyone in the entire CHL had. And he was just drafted. He's a defenseman. He's doing pretty well. So pretty solid. All right, Matt, I'll come to you next for your next one. Who's your next surprising prospect here?
Oh, we're going to go to the St. Louis Blues prospect pool and Dalibor Dvorsky. He had a little bit of a slow start because he started in the SHL to start the season, had 10 games there, no points, -6. Everyone's maybe a little bit panicking what's happening with this guy. Then they got him over to the OHL, and that's proven to be one of the best decisions right now because he's got 26 points in 16 games, and all those points and goals have come in the last month because he just had a hat trick and 4 points on Friday. I had a point streak just before that. He was shut out at his previous game, but then before that had oh my gosh, it's like counting here, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 points in 6 games. So, I mean,
Not
yeah,
bad.
he's been 5 games, so even better. He's been just great. And we all know how Dvorsky dominated the under 18s with that 13 points in 7 games. Then played pretty well at the World Juniors with 3 points in 5. So, I mean, I get why everyone was kind of panicking that why he wasn't doing too well in the SHL. But it looks like the Blues made a good decision to get him over to North America here, see how he's playing on the smaller ice. And it looks like he's thriving because he's got he's just racking up the points and the goals right now. So I'm sure Blues fans are pretty excited to see that he's back on track and on pace for 49 goals right now. So
Not bad.
Yeah, not bad. And so Dvorsky's I think he's back on to what everyone was kind of looking at as a 10th overall pick this past draft. So very excited to see what else he can do this season for the Sudbury Wolves. So but really good start.
Yeah, totally. I think this is a really good example. It's not, true in every case, but it's a really good example of how different the quality of these leagues are, going from Canadian juniors to, well, I get the other way around, but going from Canadian juniors compared to some of the top pro leagues in Europe, because he had an up and down draft year in the Allsvenskan, the second tier pro league in Sweden, really rough start in the SHL. So you can go 10 games without a point in the SHL while being talented enough to score almost 2 points a game in the OHL. That's not going to always be the case for every player, but it goes to show that if a prospect isn't performing quite as you hoped in a difficult professional league, that doesn't mean they are significantly behind someone who's scoring well in a much weaker league. Feels like this is going to be a really good way to bounce back some of his confidence. He's going to go play at the World Juniors again. With his countrymen, with some of his friends, I'm sure, who he's played on the international teams with quite a bit in the recent years. And yeah, I think it makes sense to just boost his confidence like crazy, score 40 plus goals, and then elevate him to the AHL next year probably, and start to work him into the lineup. I mean, just exactly like the perfect start, at least from once he got into Canada. Rough start, but then very, very encouraging ever since. So, all right, we're gonna finish this side off with a trio of draft eligible prospects that have been surprising to start the year. I'm gonna kick it off with Anton Silayev, who we've talked about a bunch, so I won't do too much. For my money, he's the biggest surprise this year from the 2024 draft, simply because, I don't know, 2-3 months ago, none of us had ever heard his name, or at least we wouldn't have known him based on just the name, because he was a rather unassuming MHL defenseman last year. There was nothing really to see there. That has changed very quickly. He's 6'7", massive defenseman, skates really well, protects the puck well. Honestly, could be more physical, which is scary, because once he gets physical, it's like he's just going to delete players on the ice every time he wants to. No U18 player, forward or defenseman, has scored more points than his 10 in the KHL. Vlad Tarasenko had 10 before he had 18. There's still several months for Silayev to score a single more point and set that record. No defenseman in the KHL, no U18 defenseman is anywhere close to him points-wise. But honestly, I like his defensive game too. It's not incredible, but he is in the KHL. Like I was just saying, league strength is a thing. It matters. If you put him in, I don't know, in the OHL right now, I think his defense would look a lot better probably playing against weaker competition. But I digress. Excellent start for Silayev, going from relative unknown to guaranteed first rounder, probably guaranteed top 10, top 5. Who knows where he's going to go. NHL teams like big 6'7" defensemen that move well, so he's going to go high. Peter, I'll come to you next here. Who's your draft eligible surprising prospect here?
Yeah, that's Ziev Bium. You want? Sorry?
No, I was just chanting Bium.
Okay. I was about to say, I'm like, wait, did I do something wrong there? I'm like, okay, never mind. All right.
No, you're good.
Were you saying boo or boo earns? Okay. But digress a little bit there. Gotta stay on my toes a little bit. But yeah, I mean, Bium has been absolutely phenomenal this season, and you want to see, especially for like, you know, freshman defenders, you want to see consistency and growth, and you're seeing that very, very quickly with Bium's game. We talk about, you know, Silayev, Levshunov, Dickinson being the top defenders in this class. Let's not count out Bium, because he's making a name for himself right there, and he could be headed for that top 10 top defender status as the season progresses. And, you know, obviously not as I'm going to say not as skilled or not as high end or creative as some of like the other high end puck moving offensive defensemen. He's a well-rounded defenseman, and I think I like players like that a little bit more, because you want to see what they can do in their own end. Can they defend well? And when things get a little bit hasty or a little bit, you know, into a panic, he does not, you know, overcommit, get aggressive. He stands his ground, and he's always in position. So the fact that he's having that impact offensively and defensively as well right now, I should mention 21 points in 16 games. Really impressive for his first season in the NCAA. I mean, I don't know how you can not say that, you know, he's been a surprise or a big standout this time around right now. Yeah, if he continues to grow or continues to put up this kind of a pace, yeah, don't be shocked to see him move up a lot of draft rankings, because I think the consensus right now, maybe, you know, late teens, early 20s, possibly for Bium, but there's a good chance that he's going to rise if he continues at this pace. But yeah, I've been really impressed with him. I want to see more, because he's that kind of defender that I like, where you have that offensive game, but he's very strong away from the puck as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree on all accounts there, really. And while like it seems like most rankings and stuff, including my own, have him in that range, like you said, I think that's probably like October, November levels of viewings, and that if you pulled all those same people right now, he'd be higher. He'd be definitely moving up, because for myself personally, I think he's about to crack my top 10 for sure. Just a great start from him. Really, really positive. And he's going to almost certainly be at the World Juniors for the USA. So that could be a really fun chance for him to establish himself. Last but not least, Matt, you're up with a draft eligible prospect here who's had a surprising start.
Yeah, that'd be Konsta Helenius. We've talked about him on the show a few times already, and he's starting to become one of my favorite guys. You know, he's one of those all-around type centermen that could potentially be, you know, as high as maybe a second line guy, or, you know, just a really solid middle six. Does everything. He's done everything for his team and for Team Finland whenever he's at you know, international tournaments. At the Four Nations, he had 2 goals, 5 points in 4 games. Used in almost, you know, all the situations, taking defensive zone faceoffs, killing penalties. He's a very good skater. He's just a very good all around player, and he's doing it in the Liga, which is you know, a pro league, and playing against men too, with 19 points in 24 games, which is pretty good for a guy that's not bad. That's just 18, right? I believe he's now 17. I believe he's still 17, actually. Just double check. Yeah, 17. So I mean, to play that well against competition that's much older is pretty good, and doing it, you know, and like I said, being a good all-around player too. So I'm excited to see what else he can do the rest of the season and at the World Juniors, because he's going to probably be relied upon on that team as well. You know, the World Juniors, it's interesting to see how these guys that draft eligibles, how much they play. He'll probably play in the bottom 6, but considering his game, I think he'd probably be on penalty kill as well. So yeah, very surprising, especially his offensive production so far this season.
Yeah, he's done himself a ton of favors this year, draft wise. Just been phenomenal in the Liga. Just very exciting prospect to watch. All right. We've just got a quick trio here of disappointing players, and I'm not going to go into too much detail because I don't want to get sad. I'm gonna start it off with Red Wings prospect Marco Kasper, and I'm using disappointing lightly here, but also disappointing just is relative to expectations. So I have to have high expectations for someone to disappoint me. Kasper is playing his first full season in North America, which shouldn't be like overlooked. Going from Austria as a kid to Sweden very young, and then coming to North America, it's a lot. That's a lot for a teenager to handle. But he has looked better of late, but he's had a slow start in the AHL with the Grand Rapids Griffins. I think he has 6 points in 18 games, which isn't horrible. It's really not, honestly. And he has looked better the last 5 or 6 games, I'd say. He's winning the puck battles, which is what you want to see from him. The offense has just really not been there at this level yet. The mistakes are quite obvious, although to be fair, they were in the SHL last year as well. So I don't think he's off pace or he's out of the orbit and something's going wrong. It just has not been as exciting of a start as one might have hoped. But no reason for despair, honestly. I think he'll improve throughout this year, spend another full year there probably, and really start kicking it into gear in North America, getting comfortable with the language and the cities and the travel and all that kind of stuff. So Marco Kasper has been a little on the disappointing end for me this year, so that's my pick. Peter, who do you got on this side here? The disappointing side.
I think we're starting to see why Joakim Kamell dropped in the draft. Nashville took him 17th overall. There were some, red flags or concerns about the consistency, how he started off hot in his draft year, got injured, but then he started to tail off production-wise, and he couldn't quite find his game as a result as the season progressed. But then, after that impressive draft year, he kind of had a down year, 15 points in 43 games. But when he came to North America for the Milwaukee Admirals, looked pretty decent. 13 points in 14 regular season games, added another 10 in the playoffs. So you thought that maybe he was on the rise. And now, 9 points in 18 games, you kind of see where the consistency factor is lying with Kamell, how he changes from game to game, how he's, good one or two, but then he tails off a little bit after that. You want to see that consistency, the effort. And if you want him to be that, top tier goal scoring producer, like, we've seen him to be with his shot, he needs to be a little bit better in that regard. So yeah, a bit of a big downgrade this time around. His, consistency is the main reason for that. Hopefully he could turn it around, but yeah, it's, if you're the Nashville Predators, you're kind of, you want a little bit more from one of your top prospects.
Yeah, for sure. He's the one to watch right now when it comes to like inconsistent prospects, because I agree. Like when he came to North America at the end of last year in the regular season and playoffs, it was like, wow, he's going to tear up the AHL next year. He's going to just destroy the competition. That has not been the case. This is, again, though, another example of, you can only disappoint me if I have high expectations. And that'll be even more pronounced for Matt's prospect here. Yeah. I want to say all 3 of these prospects, I expect to be great players in the NHL someday. We're not saying they are all of a sudden bad. We're not overreacting to that. It's just that they have not delivered on the expectations we had, because we really like these prospects. I'm just trying to protect you here, Matt, from any hate, because genuinely this is not like us being downers or something. But I think it's tough to argue that this player has been a little disappointing to start the year. So I'll let you get to it here.
Yeah, Devon Levi. He was my second prospect on the goaltending rankings, which I am not regretting. He was, and he is still one of the top guys. But I had a high expectations. We all did, coming off that end of the season with the Sabres, where he had really good 905 save percentage. I mean, the goals against average were close to 3, but whatever. It's a 5-2 record. As well, and he looked really solid. Looked like he was ready to be the starter for the Sabres, and came in to the season as the starter, but it kind of went off the rails. I mean, the whole team has. It's not like it's Levi's problem that the whole team has played bad defensively in front of him. But he hasn't looked that good. 3.73 goals against average, 876 save percentage, ugly numbers in 9 games, and 3-4-1 record. They finally sent him down to the AHL because they've got 3 goaltenders and they're trying to rotate between the 3. And then you got UPL, Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen, who played much better now. It's kind of taken over that starting position now. And then Eric Comrie, who is a guy that would have to clear waivers to go down, so they probably don't want to lose him. So who's the easy one to go down who's struggled, probably would benefit from the AHL? And that's Devon Levi. So he's got sent down. Pretty decent in the 2 games he's played, and 2.94, goals against average, whatever. 921 save percentage, though. So 1-1 record. So, it's not like it's bad to have him in the AHL. Technically, maybe he should have started there. For a goaltender, especially where you're looking at Wallstedt, how he's dominated. But because he looks so good in the NHL, everyone's like, he's ready. Get him to play. But he is still a goaltender, and they do require a bit more development. So I'm not panicking. I think he's still going to be a very solid starter in the NHL. Just maybe needs some seasoning, at the lower level. Maybe dominate there for a bit. It's not like the Sabres, especially if UPL is going to be, looking like he's now ready for the starting position. Maybe he gets to be the backup next season, or they do a 1A, 1B tandem. Who knows? But I'm disappointed of how the start has gone, but it's not all his fault either, because that team in Buffalo, not good defensively to start the season, at least.
No, not at all. I think that's the correct take, that, there's no reason to be worried. It's fair to be disappointed. Probably just needs some more time. Like what they were trying to do with Levi is something that we very rarely see, which is have a prospect go from whatever league into the NHL, skipping the AHL entirely. That doesn't really happen very often, especially for a high-end goaltender. And it's not going to work here either. So give him some time in the AHL. Let him be the player of the game for the Americans, the Rochester Americans, and wear that weird eagle mask that they have. I don't know if you guys saw that. Let him wear that a few more times this year. Lead them to some wins. I think that's very positive for Levi this year. All right, we're going to take a quick break and then get into a couple questions about some of these prospects again. Before wrapping up our show, I want to mention again, though, that the Hockey Writers has recently expanded our content into Substacks dedicated to each NHL team, as well as one dedicated to NHL draft and prospects content. You can sign up to get all of our best prospect contents articles delivered directly to your inbox multiple times throughout the week. There's also a premium tier with exclusive articles, mailbags, prospect interviews, and more. You can find the sign-up link for that in the video description below. Check it out. All right, we're going to jump in with a few questions that I have for you guys about a few of these prospects that we've talked about. And then we'll wrap it up with our prospects of the week, as we always like to end the show. First off, I want to talk about Zach Benson again. So as we mentioned a little earlier, we hinted at, he was taken 13th overall by the Buffalo Sabres, which immediately we were all like, come on, the Sabres, of course. It was pretty upsetting, honestly. But I want to know your guys' thoughts. If the 2023 draft was redone today, given the fact that we've already seen that he can be good in the NHL. We didn't expect to see it this soon, but all the GMs that passed on him basically already have proof that they were wrong. In a small sample size, of course, but this is real proof. So not where you would take him, but where do you think he would actually end up if they saw this coming exactly? Peter, I'll come to you first. Where do you think Benson would go in a redraft right now?
Yeah, it definitely top 10. I mean, there's no way that you could sugarcoat it. I mean, I'm pretty sure we all had him as a top 10 prospect anyways.
Yep.
Now again, the main reason being, I think we could all point to, the size factor or whatever. I think maybe that's probably the biggest thing still. But then again, my main concern, or not concern, my main point is you're seeing him pull off, between the leg dangles, all these like high end moves, and he's playing at a fast pace. The thing is, if you're going into a draft and you want to see if a player has that high end skill set, has that compete, has the intensity, the work ethic, he's basically a top 10 prospect. Zach Benson checks off all of those boxes right there for me. And you even saw it at every single point during the WHL season, during the top prospects game. He was, a hound every single time, locating and tracking that puck and getting in on the attack. And you see him battle. So that size factor isn't a concern. Does he still need to add weight or like a little bit more muscle? Of course, all prospects do, but he has that mentality anyways. And that to me alone should have been a top 10 or an easy brainer for a top 10 selection right there. The fact that he still dropped, again, big mistake because, kind of Matt Savoy dropped in 2022, but then again, there were still a little bit concerns with his game there. There were less of that with Benson this time around. And again, Buffalo Sabres come out, on top of the world because they have two top tier players, especially Benson right now. Passing on Benson outside the top 10 or not, or passing on him as when he should have been a top 10. Yeah. Easy no brainer right there.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. The Sabres have a very strange prospect pool and young core of forwards because there are so many guys that are on the medium to smaller end, but they don't care. They're just going for the best players, and that's working. Like, I'm going to read a list of forwards. Some are in the NHL, some AHL, some juniors, that are in the Sabres system that are 6 feet tall or shorter. You got Peyton Krebs, Matt Savoy, Noah Ostland, Zach Benson, JJ Paterka, Isaac Rosen. They're all 6 feet tall or shorter, which is considered small in the NHL. At this point, 6 feet tall is barely average to NHL teams somehow. They've got all those guys at that size range, which most teams would really start to avoid. But they saw Benson available at 13, and they were like, done. Check. Let's take him. And honestly, you got to applaud him for that. I'm glad someone is thinking. Matt, what are your thoughts? Where do you think Benson would go in a redraft today? How much sooner do you think he'd get picked?
Yeah, I agree with Peter. I think, definitely top 10. I want to say, like, looking at the players that were drafted ahead of him, I would actually put him ahead of Dmitry Simashev. So I would go 6. Reinbacher, he's definitely in that 5. All the other guys ahead of him, I think, go ahead of him. But Arizona, maybe looking at the team, maybe they thought, we already have high-end forwards we don't really need. We need defense, which I get. So, I mean, maybe them. But Philly, but Michkov's been so good. So, I don't know. So, maybe he goes 8. But, looking at, he's definitely a top 10 prospect. I was admittedly disappointed when the Canucks didn't pick him at 11. But I love Tom Willander, so I'm not, I'm not saying no, don't pick Willander because, definitely Willander's a guy you want in the system. But Benson, going 13, we anticipated it. We were saying he's not going in the top 10. He's going to go further. We were even saying maybe he drops further than 13. But yeah, the Sabres just got a heck of a player. He's already shown it. So I would say he's probably, I'm still going to say probably the 7, 8. You said where you pick him. I would pick him ahead of Simashev, but I get why the Coyotes didn't.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I know you're satisfied with Willander at this point, but wouldn't it be lovely to just have Zach Benson filling in the like the Niels Höglander spot right now, but better even, which would be crazy.
Problem is, I don't know if he'd be in
already.
I don't know if they'd give him a chance.
That's true. Who knows? All right. For myself, I say I'm going to go in like reverse order from where he was selected. So the Coyotes at 12. I think they'd take him again there over Daniil Boot, who has had a great start to the year in the KHL. Really solid. Gives their team a new look on offense as this massive guy with just a booming shot. So it wouldn't be by a large margin, but I think Benson, they'd take him over. The Canucks, if they could look back at 11th, I think they would take Benson over Willander. The Blues, I think they'd take him over Dvorsky. Red Wings, they'd probably take him over Danielson, although that could be close depending on how solid they feel about him after his really good showing in the preseason this year. And then the landing spot I have for him ultimately is 8th for the Capitals instead of Ryan Leonard, who's had a kind of quiet start to his college hockey career. Nothing worrisome at all, but just hasn't been on the same level we kind of expected him to be. Could just take him a little bit of time. But Benson has been firing on all cylinders off the start here. I think he has 7 points in the NHL already. So it's hard to avoid him.
Yeah.
I agree with you guys. Like, guaranteed top 10 if teams, their biggest concern was that it just wouldn't work for him in the NHL. And here we are 2 months into the NHL season, and it's working for him in the NHL already. So I think that would calm some fears and he'd go significantly higher. So anywho, okay, next question up here. Someone else we were just talking about, Jesper Wallstedt. Matt, I'll come to you first on this one. How long do you think it is before the Wild call him up? Could be this season, given how rough Gustafsson and Fleury have been as a tandem. That team can't buy a save. They're one of those teams like the Oilers, like the New Jersey Devils, the Hurricanes even, who've just had really rough goaltending when they thought they were average or better. So who knows? They could bring him up now. Maybe they think it's best for him to just dominate another year and then start to get him into games. What do you think? What do you think Wallstedt's timeline is with the Wild?
Technically, he was called up, but that was just
True.
for him to go to Sweden. Didn't play. He was just on the roster. But yeah, he's I want to say he's going to be called up this season at some point, but I don't know if the Wild feel like especially because they have Gustafsson and Fleury, unless there's an injury. I wouldn't want him sitting. So, I mean, if he is coming up, he's playing. So, I mean, it's not like they would have to have a plan that he's going to be playing some games. At the point that the Wild are right now, they've kind of turned it a little bit. I mean, only 2-3 games with their new coach, but goaltending's looked a little bit better. I mean, Gustafsson looks better, but it's not. I'd say he's not getting called up until maybe later in the season when they kind of feel like maybe they're out of it. Give him some time, give him some games. Otherwise, I think he's definitely called up permanently next season because I believe Fleury's on his last year of his deal this year. So, I mean, I'm pretty sure he is.
Yeah,
that is a 2-year deal. So there's going to be an opening. I don't think Fleury's re-signing. I think he's probably retiring. But you never know with him. He seems like a robot. He just keeps playing.
He's going.
I don't know if it'll be with the Wild. But if they feel Wallstedt's ready, I don't think they're re-signing Fleury. I think he's up here as a 1A, 1B type thing. I don't think he's good as a backup because you want him playing games. If he's not going to be in a maybe a close to a 50-50 split and starts, I think you get him back down to the AHL. So it's tough. I want to say it's going to be next season. I don't think he may get some spot duty this season, but I think next season for sure.
Yeah, that's totally fair. Peter, what are your thoughts on the situation? Do you think the Wild will call Wallstedt up this year, next week, tonight? Who knows? What do you think their plan is for Wallstedt right now?
Yeah, I think you let him season a little bit more in the AHL, still let him dominate, let him get going down there, still produce at the clip that stop pucks at the way that he's going at that rate. I agree with Matt. You're not probably calling him up unless there's an injury concern, but if you do call him up, you're not doing it right now because you don't want to put him into a losing environment when things are kind of like out of it or whatever, but you could do what the Buffalo Sabres did with Levi last season, where maybe the Sabres were still out of it. Although the Wild may be a little bit worse than the Sabres in terms of where they are. I think maybe getting some games late in the season in end of March, beginning of April, let him get that NHL experience so that way he is ready for when he makes a jump over next year. I do think next season is going to be when he gets a spot full time, be it as a starter or backup, what have you. I think that's probably the best case scenario where you're going to look at him, see where both him and the team are at the deadline. And even depends on how well his AHL season goes too. I would have to check the standings. I can't remember where Iowa is in terms of the standings, but if they're in the thick of things for the playoffs, then you'd let him go and dominate the playoffs and be a key factor there. So a lot of factors, but if his season comes to an end, then they'll probably call him up towards the end.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a unique situation, not just because Gustafsson looked like a Vezina caliber goalie last year and has been below average, and Fleury is falling off a bit now. But also just the cap situation in Minnesota has been a nightmare for a couple years now with those cap recapture penalty, the buyout penalties for Parise and Suter, still just destroying the team, honestly, just ruining their chances of building a true contender, to be honest. So like you guys were saying, like, there's that spot with Fleury. If they don't re-sign Fleury next year, there's $3.5 million in space, and bring Wallstedt in as your backup if you think that's an okay enough spot for him to play, or maybe even a real tandem goalie if Gustafsson doesn't rebound by the end of this year into next year. That saves you a lot of money having a goalie on an ELC that you trust. There you just built in $2.5 or more $1 million of cap hit. You just saved that much, which would be huge compared to even just getting a serviceable backup in the NHL nowadays. You're spending $1.5 to $2.5 million on the cap if you want someone that you can trust, at least. So built-in savings, developing your top prospect, like, it's going to be a tough balance for them. I agree. I think he'll get a couple games by the end of the year if they haven't turned it around. If they're doing well, that means at least one of their goalies has turned it around, and I think you ride the hot hand as long as you can. But if it's still middling to bad by the end of the year, I think he'll get some games and really contend for a spot next year, because he's been excellent so far. All right. Next up here, I want to talk about Konsta Helenius again briefly. Just to ask you guys, Peter, I'll come to you first. How do you think his draft year, he's only, not even halfway through it now. How do you think it will compare at the end of the season to recent other top prospects coming out of the league, like Joakim Kamell, who really hot start, cooled off significantly, or Kaakko, who was dominant and ended up going second overall? Where do you think it'll kind of line up against some recent prospects out of there? And I guess potentially, like, do you think that'll pay off in his draft spot eventually? Because we thought that Kemell was going to be maybe as high as second overall in his draft when he was hot, and then it slowed down a lot and he slid quite a bit. But what do you think of his draft year in Liga? How do you think it'll compare?
Yeah, at the moment he's solidifying himself as in that possibly 5, 6, 7 range, maybe even higher. But like you said too, is he going to cool off? Is this going to still remain hot? And I think the reason why this is going for him more is, again, I talk about the work ethic. I talk about the intensity, willing to drive the play, getting involved quite a bit. Kemell was inconsistent with that during his draft year. You saw that in spurts, but you just saw him try to be a little bit passive. You want the puck to come to him. Helenius is going towards the puck. He's getting involved with that. He wants to make something happen, regain control, and get that zone time. Kaakko, again, you saw a little bit of that during his draft year as well. You saw what made him special. I think it was the right spot to take him second overall. I think right now, the way that the New York Rangers were already built at that time, there was a lot of depth. He's still trying to work his way up. Hopefully that's starting to turn around right now. That's a good thing. But I think with Helenius, I think he's going to surpass both of those players in terms of just actual production and in terms of actual work ethic as well.
Yeah, I mean, he's certainly on pace to do that. And
again,
I agree
only
with that.
if he maintains that consistency as well.
Yeah, for sure.
Draft year, anything can change. But yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, even at this point, if the production dries up a little bit, it feels like he's certainly built up enough goodwill to coast the rest of the year at least as well as Kamell did. Probably a little better given just his defensive game is on a different level than Kamell. His effort level is constant. Yeah, I mean, he's great. So Matt, what are your thoughts on Helenius? Do you think How do you think he compares to Kaakko and Kamell in their draft years in the league? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I definitely with Kamell is a different thing because, like you say, Kamell had such a hot start, but he was I believe we had a conversation about this, about his shooting was always the same type of thing. He was scoring goals the same way. It was Tony Ferrari on. I can't remember who we had. He was talking about that, and that he's just a very one-dimensional scorer in his draft year. And well, we saw it tailed off. Yes, he was injured as well, so that kind of threw a wrench into things. Kaakko, he was very dominant in his draft year, and aside from what his development has taken, that's partly the Rangers' fault with how he's developed, but he still looks like a good NHL player. But that in his draft year, he was definitely worthy of a second overall pick. But with Helenius, I do agree with Peter with his effort level is just such a different level than those two guys, and his all around game, his defensive game. He's going to have a lot more to his, like you say, with the goodwill put on. He's going to have a lot more to him than those two other guys. I'm not saying he's going to be a second overall pick or anything like that, but he's really built himself up to be a top 5 maybe if he can keep this up. So I want to say he's going to have a higher production level, and not just production, but just his overall game by the end of his draft year. I'm not worried about a tail off with him, I think. So just because of his other intangibles that he's got.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I don't know how to phrase this to not get roasted for it eventually, but I'm just going to say it. I think Konsta Helenius is going to be a better NHL player than Cole Yzerman. That might age horribly.
But imagine if it does come true.
Yeah, I'll look really cool. I'll look really cool to like 10 people in 5 years. I don't know. It's easy to argue that he's a more complete player than Cole Yzerman, who's basically an elite shot and not a ton else at this point. He's got great skill too with the puck, but not a playmaker, not a defensive factor at all. And Helenius is those things more than anything else. But I don't know, the more I watch of him, the more convinced I am that he's absolutely a top 5 prospect. He's there for me right now, could continue to rise. I'd love to see him at the World Juniors. Hopefully he gets a few minutes. Draft year prospects don't often get minutes at that tournament if you're not Connor Bedard. But I hope he gets some. We'll see. We'll see how that goes. Hopefully, I don't regret saying that. Anyway, last question here. I just want to ask you guys. Matt, I'll come to you first on this one. Which prospect, it can be someone we talked about, it can be someone else. Which prospect has surprised you the most this year?
And it's hands down Hunter Brzustewicz. I did not
totally
anticipate what he's done this season. I thought, he's had a good draft year. We'll see how he does. But what he's done has just been out of this world. I mean, I would not have expected, if you had told me that he would be leading the OHL in assists or at one point leading the whole CHL in scoring, I mean, I would be like, no, that's not the defenseman the Canucks drafted. This must be someone
in the third round.
In the third round, there's no way. But yeah, he's definitely my surprise prospect, not just for the Canucks, but just overall. He's just been very consistent. I think the consistency is what I'm really impressed with, is that he hasn't fallen off, and we're already quite a bit into the season. He gets his point streak broken, but he's like, I'm just going to go on another 10-game point
Start
streak.
a new one.
It's fine.
Yep.
But yeah, it remains to be seen how he'll do in a level above this when he gets to the AHL and eventually the NHL, hopefully. I don't anticipate he's going to be that high end of a point producer, but you never know. But I'm excited to see what he can keep going on. But very big surprise for me this season.
Yeah, that's tough to argue. He's been phenomenal, much higher than expectations. Peter, what about you? Who's been the biggest surprise to you in the prospect world this year?
I want to say Dalibor Dvorsky, but we've already talked about him. I want to say Carson Raykop, but I've already talked about him last week or the week before. about how right I was about him, getting to that next level. So I'm going to say another prospect that I was hoping would kind of elevate his play. And that's Kasper Halttunen on the London Knights. He had the build of a power forward at the beginning of the season. I mean, even at the Hlinka Gretzky Cup before the tournament or before the season started, the draft year, he looked like he was going to be a dominant player with, the skating, the physicality, the ability to make an open ice hit, but the shot and release itself was just already at an NHL level. I believe he dealt with a head injury or a concussion, had some ups and downs and blips in his play. Obviously, that does kind of take up a toll. But when he came over to the London Knights, I mean, he's just been on a tear. 30 points already in 26 games, third in the OHL in goals with 19. I mean, I'm really happy for him because I was a lot higher on him than most. It was hard to put him outside the first because he does have all the upside, but because of the inconsistencies later on in the season, it just didn't quite work out. I had to drop him to, I believe I had him in like at least in the top 40. May have to go back and double check, but I'm really impressed with how he surprised and turned things around because he is going to be a dominant goal scorer. And if he could he has the physical stature. If he could use it just a little bit more to his advantage or be a little bit more consistent with that, the San Jose Sharks definitely have a great prospect on their hands for that.
Nice. That's a great one. There's so many to pick from. I mean, you all know already that I'm a big Aiden Fink stan.
Mm-hmm.
He's been tearing it up in college hockey. I think he's in the top 10 in scoring, tied for like 7th in NCAA scoring, which is absurd for someone who went in the 7th round. But it's legit. He's legit. However, I'm going to go with someone who I think I've maybe mentioned him once to start this year. That's Connor Zary in Calgary. Nobody really expected him to join the Flames lineup this year. I certainly didn't. But you know what? You get rid of Daryl Sutter and good things happen. He's been great through junior, through the AHL. Pelletier went down with an injury in the preseason, which kind of opened up a spot. And Zary has run with that ever since he got called up. I think, if I remember correctly, I saw that in the month of November, he was either the first ever or the first Flames rookie to score 10 points in a month since Matt Tkachuk. It was either tied with Tkachuk or past him as the most points in a month by a rookie for the Flames, which is very impressive. I don't expect him to be point per game or roughly point per game player all year this year, but he's been really, really excellent. I'm very happy to see his success in the NHL so far.
So I had Halttunen at 35. So one spot off from the Sharks selected him at 36, and then I had Carson Rakoff just behind him at 36. So
36.
Yeah.
Oh.
Hey, those are aging pretty well. I feel good about my ranking for Fink too. I think I had him in the 60s. And that was me like tempering my hype a little bit and trying not to look like a fool and put him at 40 or something. We'll see how that goes. Yours are aging well already, though. Those are pretty solid.
Yeah.
All right. We'll wrap up our show now with our prospects of the week, as we love to do. I'm just going to quickly go through mine. It is Jacob Fowler, who is a Habs prospect, a goaltender taken in the 3rd round last year. He had a great year with the Youngstown Phantoms in the USHL last year, but really caught people's attention with just a dominant playoff run. I think he had roughly a 950 save percentage through the playoffs, which is absurd, winning the championship there in the USHL. And then he has been incredible in college hockey to start the year. I mean, granted, he's on one of the best teams in the US, the Boston College. But any freshman goaltender starting every game for their team and holding on to I can't remember what he's at now, like a 920 something save percentage, maybe 930 at this point still. He was at some point in the 930s, which is absurd. Looks like he's got the inside track to be, at very least, a tandem goalie for Team USA at the World Juniors with Trey Augustine. Augustine, obviously coming through the NTDP, has that experience with USA Hockey, has those connections, and has played well, but Fowler has played even better so far. So that'll be tough competition for every other country at the World Juniors. Good luck scoring goals against Team USA. Their defense might not be the beefiest, might not be the tallest or strongest or meanest, but their goaltenders are tough. So Jacob Fowler is my prospect of the week here. Matt, who's your prospect of the week this week?
I'm going to go back to a prospect that maybe Canucks fans haven't heard in a while, people haven't heard in a while, is Arvid Kostmar. He's everyone remembers from the World Juniors a couple years ago. Actually, it's been 3 now. It was the 2021 World Juniors. He had 2 goals for Team Sweden in 5 games, and everyone was like, "Oh, who's this guy?" Got under the skin of Vasily Podkolzin in his games there. Very plucky forward. Kind of fallen off the map a little bit. I haven't talked about him in a long time. I talked to him quite a bit during that season, saying maybe he'll be a really good 3rd, 4th line guy in the NHL. That could still happen. Who knows? He drafted in 2019. He hasn't come over to North America yet. He's still playing in the SHL. Well, kind of split. This season, he's with the Allsvenskan in Djurgården. Okay, I can't even say it. Djurgården. There we go.
Yeah. It's a tough one.
That's a tongue twister. But he's got 5 points in 6 games since he was sent back there. 3 points in 17 games in the SHL is okay. Decent, but he's been sent down. He's been pretty good in his last 5 games. He's got 2 goals, 4 points. So 4 of his points have come in the last 5. Getting quite a bit of ice time down there too. I mean, he's had 20 minutes in his previous game on the 24th. In the SHL, he was only averaging 4 minutes, whatever. I mean, that's like, geez, come on.
I wonder why he's not scoring points.
Wonder why he's not doing anything. But yeah, I think he could still be a good, maybe his ceiling is just an AHL guy, but we'll see. I think he could still be a 3rd, 4th line grinder guy that just, plays a simple game down in the 4th line. I still have some hope that he'll become something, but it gets to a point where you're like, why aren't they signing him to an ELC? So yeah, it's going to be tough to see when he'll be able to become over, or they just say, that's it. We're just going to let you go. We'll see, but I'm still have some hope. Benny's doing pretty well in the last few games here. After I kind of admittedly forgot about him too, because I was just looking, hey, I remember him. And so maybe I got to do some updates on some prospects that have not been in the spotlight.
Not panned out. Yeah, fair. I think it's fair to have some hope there still. He's a worker. He fights really hard and competes really hard. So he's going to be a good player somewhere eventually. Might not click in the NHL. Might stick to Europe though. Who knows?
Yeah.
Peter, you're up last here. Who's your prospect of the week here?
So I'm going to kind of cheat the system a little bit, and instead of prospect of the week, going back and looking at his stats for the month, it was impressive. But I mean, I am going to pick Jordan Dumais from the Halifax Mooseheads, and the reason why is it's been a while since I've been in tune with the QMJHL, so I thought I'd go back and look at everything. And looking at his splits for the month of November, 27 points, but he had 9 multi-point games and only 1 game where he didn't register a point. I know we should be doing it on a week-to-week basis. I know he only had 1 goal.
It's all good.
In like the 2 games in December already, but if you count like the tail end of the last week of November, he had 7 points as well, with 2 games against Moncton and believe it is Blainville Boisbriand. So he had 7 points in those 2 games, plus 1 more in December. So yeah, that's so impressive for the last week itself too. So mix of prospect of the week and month, but yeah, Columbus Blue Jackets. I mean, prospect, he just keeps getting better and better. And as we all like to do our, on pace stats, 128 points in 50 games, down from the 140 he had last season. But, a little bit disappointing there. But you know what? Still impressive. Still impressive overall what Dumais is continuing to do at the QMJHL level. I think he's ready for the next level.
Oh, He's too good for that league. He's too good.
He is. He really is.
He feels like the latest casualty of the CHL NHL agreement thing, not allowing him to play in the AHL right now.
Abolish that agreement.
It's not fair to him at this point. Like, they gave Shane Wright an exemption because him being such a high profile prospect made the CHL look bad that they were holding him back. Like, there was too much publicity that they were holding him back. Feels like Dumais deserves the same treatment, even though he's not as high profile, but clearly too good for the CHL.
Yeah.
Just way too good for it at this point. Anyway, we'll track him this year. He'll play for Canada World Juniors. He'll score 120 points
on pace.
I don't know. It's absurd. Anywho. All right, well, that'll do it for us this week. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Prospect Corner. Make sure you subscribe to the Hockey Writers YouTube channel to make sure you catch all of our new episodes. And also make sure you check out our NHL Drafts and Prospect Substack. Stay caught up on all our new prospects content with the World Juniors coming up very, very soon. There's a link in the description below. Check it out. All right. Thank you, Peter and Matt, as always. And thank you all for joining us on this week's episode of Prospect Corner. We'll see you next time.